All right, folks, thanks for coming back once more. I am Nora McKenzie, the member of the Business Reference and Academic Libraries Committee for BRASS, and also the co-chair of the Symposia Subcommittee alongside Kristen Cunningham. My fellow subcommittee members are also Angel Truesdale, Brian Garrison-Wynn, and Doris Tweed. All of our sessions today will be recorded and sent out to those who have registered after the symposium. If you haven't already, please mute your audio and your video as we get started. And for this session, I'm excited to not only be sort of the host bringing us into the session, but also the moderator. So our next session is how we broke public transit, and you can too, which I'm excited to hear about, supporting competitive venture creation through business information literacy instruction. Our presenter today is Lily Riley from Northeastern University. So I'm going to turn it over to Lily to kick us off.
Well, thank you, Nora. Let me go ahead and share my screen for everyone. And then Nora, if you can just confirm that you can see. Awesome, great. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. So let's go ahead and get started. So a little bit about myself, like as Nora mentioned, my name is Lily Riley and I use she, they pronouns. In my position, I am the entrepreneurship librarian at Northeastern University, which has its main campus in Boston. Part of my role is liaising to our business school, in addition to providing teaching and learning support. However, at Northeastern, we have a large entrepreneurship ecosystem, which spans different colleges and student groups, which I'll expand on in a bit. So that plays into my role as well. This event that I will be sharing about could not have been done without the other members of my team. So I want to spotlight Kyle Hannon, the Entrepreneurship Program Manager, and Carter Horia, our Entrepreneurship Co-op student. This event, in terms of planning, running, and after the event, was all a joint effort. So I'm just presenting on behalf of the team, but this is really all a joint effort. This is just a brief overview of the context of the presentation for today. So through this session, you'll be able to learn how to design a long-form event that will support venture or startup creation specific to your learning community or campus. And in this event, you'll learn how to use student-centered and active teaching methods to teach the BRASS guidelines. So to provide some quick context, as I mentioned, part of my role is in this very unique entrepreneurship ecosystem at Northeastern. So yes, we have the Damore McKim School of Business, and a lot of our entrepreneurship interest among our student body lives in that college. However, to the left, you'll also see what is called Mosaic. And that is, like it's mentioned, Northeastern's hub of student-led entrepreneurship. So Mosaic is sort of the headquarters, and all of these other student clubs are within Mosaic, and they're all focused on some aspect of entrepreneurship. So for example, NU Impact is an impact investing club. IDEA is a venture accelerator. Vital to the bottom right over here is a health sciences entrepreneurship group. And again, these are all student constructed, student led. So in part of my role, I work with these student groups and support all of their research needs. So in developing this event, we called it an innovation challenge, and we wanted to think about what is a unique need that the library can meet. We talked about there's already this existing ecosystem with all of these different clubs. There's the business school. So what can the library do to meet a unique need? So what we came up with was called the Innovation Challenge. It was an all-day event. So yes, we did run an event for 8 hours from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on a Sunday, centered around solving some kind of business problem. And it was rooted in teaching business information literacy. So as our role as librarians, how can we support research needs? How can we support information literacy development? And that was the methodology behind running the event. We were able to get a digital badge credential for this event. And the reason behind this was that we didn't know what student buy-in would look like. We were asking students to show up all day on a weekend to learn how to conduct business research, and we knew that would be somewhat of a big ask. So the idea was that this is a, manifestation of their work that they can put on their resume, they can show future employers. So we were able to get this credential. We did have to submit a proposal to the university, and we did have to align that proposal with the needs of their badge and credentials. I'm happy to take questions about that at the end. I just don't have the time to get into that at this moment, but this is what our badge looked like. And we are happy to say that all of our attendees have claimed their badge. So a little bit about why we decided to run or create this event. So we wanted to pick a problem. Like I said, this event, the idea was that students are going to solve some kind of business problem. And we wanted to pick a problem that was engaging, that had some kind of a solution and was exciting or would generate a lot of interest among students. So what might that be? So we decided that students would try to create a rival to Boston's MBTA system. So the images to the left and right, the left is the MBTA logo. Again, this is Boston's public transit system. To the right is a map of some of the key subway routes and bus routes. And in the middle, I'm from Philly, so rivals, Phillies and Mets. So again, students were making a rival business to the T. So this could be a public transit option, this could be another public transit option, but something that would disrupt that local market related to transit. And the reason we picked the T is that so many students, faculty, and staff take the T every day. And like many public transit systems, it has a lot of problems, late arrivals, train derailments. It doesn't go where you need it to go when you want it to go somewhere. And we just knew it would spark a lot of interest and controversy among our students. So how does this map or align to the BRASS competencies? So the three main ways that it aligns is through industry research, market research, and economic and regional research. So for industry research, we're looking at a specific industry. We're looking at transportation. We did include private and public options. So students were not tasked with creating a whole public transit system, but just something that would offer a rival service to the MBTA. In terms of market research, we did have students conduct research on who their potential customers would be for this service. Many people might think, oh, well, everyone, in a major city would take transit, but there are certain lines that maybe run to a college or lines that run to major hospital hubs. So they're more likely to be serviced by nurses, doctors, scientists. So really trying to get to the root of who is the user of your service or product. And in terms of economic and regional research, we wanted to pick something that was unique to our community. So that's why we picked the T. It's unique to Boston, but it does relate to a greater industry, and students would have to become familiar with what are the economic and regional factors in the metro area. So this is how our problem aligned with all of these different BRASS competencies. From this, so we're hosting an all-day event centered around solving a business problem, and our business problem is creating a rival to the T. How do we teach that? So what do we do? And Carter Hourier, our entrepreneurship co-op student who is with us for 6 months, unfortunately, he'll be leaving us at the end of this month, but we love him dearly, kept saying this over and over. Creativity requires guardrails. And what we mean by guardrails is that students need some kind of structure. If you just let students free rein, sometimes that free rein can be too overwhelming and can actually limit the creativity. So we had to think about where and in what ways did students need structure to produce something innovative, creative, and new that would not just be another train line, another subway. So how we decided to teach this was through three main deliverables for the day. So the three deliverables were a value proposition canvas, a research blueprint, and a pitch deck. So the value proposition canvas asks students to map what their problem solution would be. So that's whatever service or product they're offering to their customers to try to find a value that the customers would want to buy into the product or service. A research blueprint asks students to identify 3 future customer segments that they would then expand into should their product or service be initially successful. And of course, a pitch deck. So this was a competition between student teams. So we wanted the student teams to be able to pitch their idea to a panel of judges and be evaluated according to a set of criteria for how well they did throughout the day's challenge. So this is a screenshot of our rubric that we used. I won't go into too much detail. As you can see on the left, we did include the value proposition canvas, the blueprint, and the pitch all as criteria for evaluation. And then the additional criteria we decided on was risk taking. We wanted new ideas. Again, we didn't just want another train line. And that falls also into innovative thinking, thinking outside the box, and storytelling. So this related to, did they submit the pitch, but also how was their pitch? How were they able to communicate their idea? These were some basic ground rules for the day. So of course, everyone needs to be included. We need high participation. This was very key, and it kind of falls into some of the other topics of today's symposium. We did not allow AI. You couldn't use AI for idea generation. You could not use AI to solve your problem. We just thought it would be too much of a distracting factor and that it would limit creativity as opposed to increase it. So no AI was allowed. And wherever you were when it was time to pitch is what you did. So we had a very hard cutoff with the work submission at the end of the day. Just a very, very brief overview of our budget. I know the coloring on the pie chart is a little hard to see. We did have a budget for this event, and while I won't go into the specifics of the budget itself, most of our budget was spent on food. So we did provide breakfast, lunch, and snacks throughout the day. We did give out stickers at the end of the event, and we did have big posters at the front of the library. And the winning team, every member got a $25 gift card. So we did have a budget for this event, but if you were to do this at your college or university, it can be done on a low or no budget. So just want to briefly mention that. To the left is a screenshot of our event schedule. As mentioned, it was a long day. And to the right, we chunked out our day into 4 main 90-minute chunks. And the first 2 chunks are where most of the guardrails were in terms of us needing to teach content and structure learning. And the last 2 is really where students had more time to be creative, do their own thing, work in the way they wanted to. So most of our teaching, falls into the value proposition canvas chunk, which is what I will be discussing next. So when we tried to think about how do we teach students to try to make a rival to the MBTA, we tried to think about starting with your what, like, oh, am I going to make a roller coaster? Am I going to make a helicopter? But we found that that ultimately didn't matter if you didn't have a customer base. So we decided that we needed to start teaching students who the customer was before they could even start thinking about what their offering would be. So this is how we started to teach mapping to a customer. So we gave everyone this persona named Alan, who was a practice persona. So every student got to do this to learn how to understand who a customer is. So you can see underneath the picture of Alan, there's some brief demographic information about him, how old he is, what he does for a living, how much money he makes. I know we wish we could all make as much as Alan does as a yoga instructor. And then a brief description about him, that he lives in a small rural town, he hosts yoga retreats, he does live alone, and he tries to meet his friends at the local Y, but the drive is too long. He wishes he had more opportunities to connect with others. And then we asked students to answer some questions about Alan. So at this point in my presentation, I'd like to ask you, this will be a very quick lightning round. So as fast as you can type, what are some words that you would use to describe Alan? So you can drop those in the chat whenever you're able to. What do you think you would use to describe Alan? So I'm seeing he's able-bodied, that we know of, but he is older. He does have some extra income, late career. He's about to retire. He is a boomer. I'm just shouting some out. He's active. He likes to exercise. Let's see. He's a senior. He may be lonely since he lives alone. These are great. So now, knowing those things, what values do you think Alan might have? What do you think are things that are important to Alan? And again, just going to shout some things out. I see connection, community, time with friends, health, wellness, convenience, socialization. Great. So we asked students to, like you just did, who is Alan? Knowing who Alan is, what are some things he values? And now I guess you know what I'll ask you next. Knowing these things, where else might Alan go? So it is mentioned that he goes to the Y, he goes to his his condo, his yoga studio. Drop in the chat, where else do you think he might go to meet these other needs? I see Whole Foods, right? Because he's health conscious. Maybe the library, he wants to read, he wants to stimulate his mind. The doctor, because he cares about his health. The senior center or other rec centers, it's a social type of place where you can connect with others. These are great. Walking track at the high school or maybe parks. I see parks. This is great. So now here comes the fun part. How much do you think Alan would be willing to spend on a service that could possibly meet these needs, given his income? And you can just ballpark throw out. And this is per month. How much do you think he would spend per month? Seeing in the hundreds, maybe lower hundreds, that closer to 75. If he has a car, that might factor into it for sure. Great, these are awesome. So as you can see through that activity, you're really trying to get to know who your customer is, what they value, and then where they might go to map what your product or service might be. So what we did next was we assigned groups two of these Boston specific personas. So you'll see here we have Jason, and I have arrows pointing to what make this specific about Boston. He lives in Brighton. He works at Boston Medical Center. He meets with his bandmate who lives in Jamaica Plain. He's a scientist. These are things that students can locate and understand based on living in this community. And again, students will have to be able to map what Jason's commute looks like and try to understand all of these different factors about what he values, where else he might go, how much money he has. From that, we ask students to take what they know about these personas and map them to this value proposition canvas. So on the right side are the customer jobs. So that's what the customer is trying to do. On the top are gains, which are things that are positive associations with the experience. So if you're taking the train, is it fast? Does it always come on time? Is it cleanly? These are some examples. Some pains would be negative associations. Is the train always late? Did it derail one time and you didn't get home for 5 hours and now you have a negative experience? So these are things that students had to map. And then on the flip side of that, how does that inform your product or service? So knowing what I know about Alan or Jason, what is a good product or service for them? How can I increase the positive associations based on their values and what I know about them? And how can I decrease or alleviate some negative aspects of this product or service so that it better maps to them? So we're trying to get to product customer mapping, product customer fit. The next activity we did, which is rooted in this business research component, is we asked students to choose one or two Mintel reports that mapped to their assigned personas. So if you're thinking about Alan, you might choose baby boomers, for example. And from these Mintel reports, we gave them 3 guiding questions to hone down their research, because as you know, Mintel reports might be a little bit too long or long-winded, and to identify the answers to these questions. So for Alan, for example, in this baby boomers report, I can see that 65% of baby boomers believe that they actively work on trying to stay sharp, right? Because they know that that's important in their older age. So if I know that, how can I create a transit option that's going to help my customers stay sharp? Is there a library of books on the train or on this transit option that they can read? Does the transit option stop at the park and the library and the senior center? So how does this secondary research support my value proposition canvas and what I know about my customer? So again, it's not as important what tool you're using, whether you're using Mintel or eMarketer or whatever resource you're using. It's more important to teach students how to use that information to inform a business practice. Next, we asked students to complete this research blueprint where they had to identify 3 future customer segments and what kind of information they would like in terms of primary research and secondary research. So this is an example of a student submission. So they believed that in the future, they'd like to expand into tourists, retirees, and business travelers. And then, excuse me, they're able to list what kinds of primary research they're looking for when they interview or survey these customer segments. And in terms of secondary research, they're able to identify what kind of information they'd like from a report so that if they were to find these reports, they can scan through to find the type of information they are looking for. And finally, we asked students to submit a 2-slide pitch deck for us. We didn't include an example for students. This is one aspect of that guardrail, no guardrail type of thing, because we got some really good submissions and we were very proud of them. So this is actually our winner, the Egg Pod Express. So students were incredibly creative with their solutions, why they were important to their specific customer base, what their solution might look like. So this is one that goes underwater. It has some rail lines above you, off the ground, but it can also work as a car. So this is our winner. And again, students were very creative with their pitch decks. So what are some pedagogical underpinnings of this teaching? Why did we teach in this way? So to the left here, constructivism. As I mentioned before, the environment at Northeastern is very unique in that so much of the entrepreneurial ecosystem is student created, student run. And we wanted to build off of students' experiences, living in Boston, taking the T, trying to come up with solutions to problems. So that is why so much of this was student focused. In the top here, you'll see Kucklow's model of the information search process. And while students weren't like working on a research paper, they were still trying to find a solution to a problem through research. They were starting out in this vague uncertainty, getting confused or doubt. They're still moving along this process, and we wanted to normalize that experience throughout the event. Underneath that to the left is an image of Paulo Freire. This is someone who guides all of my teaching. He is one of the fathers of critical education theory or critical pedagogy, which is the idea that education can be liberatory and that it can work to better oppressed peoples and oppressed systems and break down societal injustices. And then to the right of that is Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. So we tried to think about where are students now? Where can they be with help and support from a teacher, from their group members, from working with others? And then what's the push to get them just beyond their reach? And we tried to think about how does the structure of our activities get students to expand their learning? So now we'll talk about the results. What happened? How did it go? So as you can see here, we were very surprised. Most of our attendees were not business majors. Let's see, we have data science, engineering, analytics, management science. So they're somewhat business related, but we were very surprised that we didn't have a lot of business students. And because of that, on this chart here, most of our students in the red and orange had minimal or no knowledge of entrepreneurship before this event. They didn't know what it meant to launch a product or a service, to go through this kind of ideation process. However, they still found it really satisfying. Students say they liked a very structured approach. They found the finished product to be satisfying. They liked agreeing to a problem statement and solution. They liked the risk factor of trying to come up with something interesting, innovative, different. So we were very pleased that students had a lot of fun through our event. And because of that, all of our students said that they would attend or recommend this again. I just gave a student one of her prizes today, and she's like, "Are you doing another one of these? When is it?" So we were very happy to see that students did actually enjoy the event, and that they would spend an all-day Sunday with us. We were very honored. And because of this, again, students gained a lot of new skills. So we are happy to see that students gain the hard skills we wanted them to learn, such as business research, product ideation, being customer centered when you're creating a product or service. But they also learned a lot of soft skills, leadership, teamwork, communication. And we are pleased to see them hit on both of those aspects. Just a quick note on marketing. So this event would not have been able to be successful without how we marketed our event. So on the bottom left, all the way to the far left, is kind of our core poster that we use, and we hung that around campus and posted it on social media. But then these ones on the top, the yellow line and the Boston Sphere, are kind of plays on local Boston, I don't know, knowledge. So the yellow line, what we did was we took the MBTA map and created a fake subway line and then called it the yellow line. We knew that would be super attention getting, and it's also in the same format as the MBTA sort of like announcements are. It actually ended up on MBTA subreddit, so we knew that would be very controversial. And same with the, this newspaper one to the right of that, the Boston Sphere instead of the Boston Globe, just playing on sort of local knowledge of students. And the bottom screenshot here is that we had over 100 responses on our interest form saying, I want to attend this event. I'm interested. What's going on? How can I register? So without this innovative new marketing approach, we would not have been able to get such high student buy-in. So definitely a recommendation if you're thinking about hosting a similar type of event. So what are some next steps, or what went wrong? What would we do differently? So we did use LibApps as our registration system. However, we used Microsoft Forms for an interest form. So we wanted to capture student interest and then sort of launch the registration to that interest form. And because there were two different systems, it got really confusing, where students thought the interest form was the registration and they didn't understand, like they had to re-register. So in the future, we would try to have one system. Additionally, students didn't understand, and this could have been a cultural issue as well, the arrival time. So the event started at 10 a.m. for students, and we had students showing up 30 minutes, an hour late, and that was really hard when you're trying to run a fast-paced all-day program where the student comes an hour late, they've already missed an hour's worth of really important content. So in the future, we would be more clear about how a late arrival would impact their performance in the event. Consistent and clear marketing. So at one point we did use hackathon wording, which then people had a misunderstanding of what the event was. So just being really clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And also a note on judges. So we wanted to be able to get judges from the different colleges in this entrepreneurial ecosystem I mentioned. And we did reach out to them, but their calendars were booked. So if you're going to do this, you'll need to reach out to people in advance. So what are some key findings? Going off of reaching out to people in advance, you'll need to start planning something like this at least a few months before you plan to do it. There's going to be a lot of moving parts, and you're going to need that much time. You need to start with who your target audience is, what you want them to do, and figuring out what your problem's going to be that's really going to engage students. And finally, to connecting with your campus partnerships. Do you want alumni to be judges? Do you want faculty to be judges? And then being conscious about reaching out to those stakeholders. We tested and iterated our learning activities before the final implementation. So we hosted, I want to say 3 or 4 sessions with our librarian colleagues and asked them to act like students. And we tried to teach them and then get their feedback. And we did change a lot of our learning activities. So if you're going to do something like this, you will want to plan for testing. You'll want to consider how much or how little structure your students need. Northeastern is a very determined high energy student body, but they do need structure still. So you'll have to think about what that looks like for your college or campus. And finally, just a note on the back end for us librarians. Again, there's a lot of moving parts to an event like this, so you'll need some kind of project management system for you and your team, and you will need to be having weekly or a couple times a week meetings, at least for that month ahead of the event to just plan. So thank you so much. I know that was a very quick overview of a very long event, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Looks like we've got quite a few questions that have popped up in the chat, so I'll just go ahead and read them out. So our first question is, and this was, I think, specifically in reference to the slide you had that highlighted the locations within the prompt. So does that benefit students who are from the area or nearby? Did you have any groups of students who are more unsure about local neighborhoods?
Yeah, that's a great question. It definitely does favor students who are familiar with the area. We did want students who weren't familiar with the area to be able to, again, like research that. And so we did link to, we had a Canvas page and we put up a bunch of different Boston maps on that page. So we wanted students to think, if I don't know something, how do I then find the answer, whether that's a business problem or what have you? If you're going to start a business in a neighborhood, you'd want to research that neighborhood. So we kind of tried to promote that, I don't know, let me look into it kind of mindset.
And I'll say, if I ask a question and y'all have any follow-up questions to the answer, please just put them in the chat and I'll ask your follow-up questions too. Another question, I may have missed it, but how many students did you have attend? How did you recruit, which I think you got into a little bit with the marketing. Did you collect info on how many were business students versus just students from the general student population? Again, I think some of those got answered as you were going through, but.
Yeah, so we had 18 total attendees on the day of. And as I mentioned, most were not business students. And I'm trying to think of the other aspect of that question.
Sure. Let's see. We talked about how you recruited, which you shared the marketing information. No, I think you got all the pieces because I think you answered some of them earlier. So
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Another question, did you ask the students to rank why they signed up? Did you ask the ones who signed up but did not come, why that was?
We did not. So that's a great area for future surveying. And so we will be hosting this event again in the spring. So what we did was we kind of entrepreneured it ourselves, launched minimum viable product, see what the response is. And now we're going to iterate and do it again. So I appreciate that suggestion.
And this actually goes back to an earlier question. So you said you had 18 attendees. How many teams did that end up like amounting to, and how were those teams?
Yeah, we had teams of 4. So we did ask students if they were attending with someone they already knew to like put that down. And that was another problem where we had people who didn't show up and then people who did show up but didn't register. So good thing to keep in mind. So it's mostly teams of 4, and I think we had one team of 5, and it ended up being 4 or 5 teams.
All right, one question. An all-day event seems difficult with student classes, etc. Although I think you mentioned it was on the weekend. Would you consider doing a shorter window of time in the future, or was that not an issue for folks?
Yes and no. So yes, if you're doing an all-day event like this, it will have to be on a weekend. So you have to think about, is that something you're willing to do? We are able to accommodate that here. We are planning other events that are kind of these modular 90-minute chunks that I mentioned, to be done in like in a workshop setting, but I think it is best done in that all-day kind of framework.
And how far into the semester did you host the event? How do you think the timing might have impacted your registration and attendance? And if you do it again, would you aim for a similar point in the semester?
Yeah, definitely. So we had it in October. So I think it was right before, right after midterms, like kind of in that dead break, which was perfect. Do you want to hit students like not at the beginning of the semester, not at the end, but also like not where big projects midterms lie. So we will be doing our next one in March, which is kind of like the October of spring. But yes, if you plan an event like this around midterms or finals, it will impact how much attendee buy-in that you get.
Those are the questions we had in chat. Does anybody have any additional questions? I'll wait for a second, but I had one as you were going through. You mentioned there was more involved in the badging and credentialing process. Would you care to expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So we have our own sort of internal process at Northeastern for badging and credentialing. So I kind of briefly touched on this, but we had to submit a proposal for that. So we had to write up a proposal and map how it matched the different badge criteria. So Northeastern has different badging criteria. There's sort of like a lower level of engagement, and then it goes up the totem. I think there's about 3 or 4 engagement levels. So ours is one of those higher buy-in engagement badges. And then we had to get approval for that. So our badge did get approved. This was a couple month long process of getting this micro credential. But it is something that Northeastern's moving towards. So, that does affect like how, if your campus is not super interested in badging, obviously that's going to impact it. And then post event, we had to submit all of the students' names and information to the registrar, and the registrar has to do their own internal badging, credentialing, and then we had to inform students of how to actually claim that badge. What does that actually mean? So yes, there's a lot of back end work to get that kind of digital credential tied to the event itself.
Nice, thank you. And we had a couple more pop up in the chat. Is there a local corporate or municipal partner you'd like to plan another edition? Perhaps.
Yeah, I guess not local corporate necessarily. We'd like to start on campus. So we like to get sort of more engaged with this entrepreneurial ecosystem and have some of them be our judges and help kind of cross promote it. And then in terms of local and municipal, we've talked about partnerships with BPL as a possibility, or other Boston Library Consortium libraries would be interesting to reach out to. There are, local businesses where we could maybe get funding. So yes, there's lots of future avenues. And again, kind of started with launching minimum viable product and then seeing where we go from there. But that is a good way to expand in the future.
One more question. What advice do you have for folks interested in running a similar event at an institution that doesn't have that same type of badging or credentialing system?
Sure. I think in the future, it would be good for us running this event to ask how much that even influenced their participation in the first place. But that was our reasoning behind getting the badge, is that we thought it would increase attendance. I think you would then have to just think about how can I increase sort of that fun factor. So, us making the problem something we knew was going to be controversial and students had a lot of opinions about, and they would be willing to spend all day doing, like, what does that look like on your campus? Do you know that students only attend events if there's food? Then you definitely want to make sure you have food. Do you want to give away a prize? And then is that prize going to be something higher value than a $25 gift card that we did? Do you want to give away like, I don't know, like I don't know, some kind of bigger thing? Do you want to do like an accelerator where you give like funding so they could maybe start their own venture? What are other ways that you could um, get buy-in without that badge is what I would recommend.
And one more question that popped up. Just any thoughts as to why there were so few business school students?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. I think we talked about this internally with our team, and we thought maybe they felt like, oh, I already know this, so like I don't want to do this. We do have a large international population at Northeastern, and they tend to be a lot more engaged in these sort of like extracurricular events. And that was a lot of our population that attended. So maybe that has to go in with it. We did hang flyers in the business school, and we did table at a business event. So we're a little confused as well, but we're going to see in the spring too. We're going to try to do more outreach within the business school, and so we'll see. Maybe we can get more buy-in.
Any more questions for Lily?
And I will say too, please feel free to email me or reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Got a couple more. I got one more. This seems like a great idea for an entrepreneurship class. Do you think it could be adapted to a 75-minute class? I think you mentioned there was a 90-minute possibility, so just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it would be challenging to adapt to a 75-minute class. So I think you'd want to think about what chunk of this challenge could you do. So I don't think you could ask students to solve a whole business problem in 75 minutes, but maybe you could teach them what it looks like to do a value proposition canvas, and you could assign them an industry or a product and ask them to map that. So I think you can teach aspects of it, but I don't think it would be the same experience in that limited time frame.
I think now we're getting lots of thanks for you in the chat. Would you like to wrap us out with anything, or we can you prefer? Oh, actually, one
Sure,
more
just yeah, I could take a question.
question. It sounds like an amazing event. Perhaps you consider publishing about this. So I guess maybe just something for you to think about. Have you considered publishing?
Yes, thank you. I started this position in September, believe it or not. So after I get my feet on the ground, we shall see. But thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. And again, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to meet with anyone. And I've read a lot of your work or have met you already since we're such a small community. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. So thank you so much to Lily for sharing. That was really interesting content. And I think looks like from the chat, a lot of people have some great ideas to take back to their own institutions. We will be taking our last break until 4 o'clock. We will begin promptly at 4 with our last presentation for the day. And that presentation is mini case studies engaging professional development for academic business librarians. Just as a note, the recording for this session and all of our sessions, along with the slides, will be sent following the symposium, including a feedback form that we would love for you to fill out, just to get some of your thoughts about our event. So we'll see you all again in about 18 minutes at 4 o'clock when we start with our last session for the day.